Don't chew on that, Max.
Cooper loves that chew, too.
Oh, now he's into Cooper's food. Wow, he is loving it. What do you feed Cooper?
Blue Buffalo Life Protection Formula. He never leaves a crumb. I love it because it's made with high-quality protein, nutrient-rich fruits and veggies, and wholesome whole grains.
Looks like we're switching to Blue.
Blue Buffalo foods are made with the superior ingredients your dog needs to thrive. Can your dog food say that? Visit feedbluefood.com to learn more.
It's the Smucker's Uncrustables podcast with your host, Uncrustables. Okay, today's guest is rough around the edges. Please welcome Crust.
Thanks for having me.
Today's topic, he's round with soft, pillowy bread.
Hey.
Filled with delicious PB&J.
Are you talking about yourself?
And you can take him anywhere.
Why'd you invite?
And we are out of time.
Are you really cutting me off?
Uncrustables are the best part of the sandwich. Sorry, Crust.
Hey there, welcome to Why We Roll, a tabletop role-playing game design podcast.
We're your hosts, Chris Pickett, creator of the historical fantasy game Dance Macabre, and Wythe Marshall, creator of the political sci-fi game Stillfleet.
Throughout the show, Chris and Wythe hope to amplify new creative voices. We'll chat with different TTRPG designers, focusing on the world of indie games.
We take a curious approach to game design, working through a range of mechanical and narrative questions that are pertinent to many designers, players, and GMs.
We hope to showcase fresh and even challenging ideas about what makes imagination-based games just so powerful.
Okay, let's find out why we roll.
And we're live.
Oh,
sweet. How's it going, everybody?
Chill.
Yeah, doing well today. Excited to get into this one.
Yeah. So, Chris Pickett, thanks for joining as always.
Yes.
Why We Roll.
Thank you, Wythe Marshall.
Thanks for saying my name for the pod.
We're still figuring this part out.
Yeah, the snappy intro. We have a guest. We decided to add a guest into the mix after already, in our pack schedule for the following winter, because there's a new game coming out that selfishly I'm working on with Tony. So our guest today is Tony Grasso, who's a really cool artist and designer. And yeah, we're excited to talk about all of Tony's work, not just that new game, but that is the reason why, Tony, I invited you on. Yeah. So thank you so much for making time.
Oh, cool. No, thank you guys for inviting me. I'm excited.
Well, I was just going to say, Tony, would you like to introduce yourself, introduce some of the stuff that you've been working on, and most, I guess, again, like Wythe was saying, most notably, Blister Critters, which will be coming out soon.
Yeah, sure. Soon, yeah. We'll be coming to Kickstarter potentially within the next couple of months here.
Nice.
So, my name's Tony. I am the creator of Odd Gob Games. I make funky little, sometimes larger, now that I'm working with Wythe, tabletop games. I kind of really kickstarted doing more solo projects last Zine Quest. With a system neutral / agnostic, whatever word you think sounds better, adventure, where you kind of run through the corpse of a dead god, called Amu. That went really well, and since then I've been developing a number of other smaller projects. Frogs with Shotguns is a board game where you play as a frog with a shotgun against other frogs with shotguns, trying to get the golden fly. People enjoy that. I've enjoyed playing it. I'm working on a project for the far future that I'll be doing solo as well. But most notably, the biggest undertaking that I've tried to put together is Blister Critters, a tabletop TTRPG using the grid system. Wythe has so lovingly offered it up under a really expansively third-party license, and I think that a lot of the system is really smart and allows me to really stretch and pull at some of the more creative bits that I enjoy to put together Blister Critters. That's pretty much what I've been working on almost nonstop. I'm also putting together a modern Morkborg hack, so I have my hands in a lot of different fields right now, primarily in the illustration side of most of the stuff. I struggle to write the best that I can, and while I think my ideas are great, I know that my illustration and the style that I aim for is definitely where I thrive.
Well, it's great working with you on all the ways, we should also mention, Tony, you've done a lot of illustration work now for Stillfleet.
Yep, that's true.
So that's how I think initially we connected, because somebody sent me your art station, maybe on the Creators Guild on Discord. I don't recall, but yeah, we really love your art. So Ethan and I have been working with you on Stillfleet, and then that led us to learn about your other work, and yeah, I think the writing for Blister Critters is great too. So that's kind of something you and I've been collaborating on. So yeah, it'd be cool today to talk about a number of things. As usual, since you're an artist, maybe between you and Chris, we can talk a little about like how do you illustrate games and visual design, visual driven game design, and maybe some practical tips. I don't know, that kind of stuff might be of interest.
I think that I do it definitely wrong. More often than not, I'm like, that sounds like specifically with frogs with shotguns. It was like a morning warm-up sketch. I do a frog with a shotgun. I send it to Twitter, and it blew up. For my means, it blew up in terms of the numbers. And I was like, oh, well, now I'm going to make a game. And so I went artwork first and then game second. Funny enough, Blister Critters is kind of that way, where I drew a mouse with some blisters and kind of hanging off a TV stand. I was like, people like this. I'm going to roll with it. So on my part, how I design games is I make a cool image, and I'm like, it'd be really cool if I could play this. And then I do that. I don't think that's the common wisdom that people typically give, but it's worked for me so far. So we'll see how long I can keep that going.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. You have to have some point of departure for imagining yourself as a character within a game world, whether it's a board game, RPG, whatever. But I think probably more often than not, it's a visual cue that kind of gets us there. Something that Wythe and I have talked about on here a lot is picking up your first tabletop RPG, and I think we were talking about this last week, or maybe it was with Ethan a few weeks ago. I can't quite remember now, but just you open it up and you have that visual stimulus where you're like, oh, this is a world that I want to be in. This is a world that I want to live in. So yeah, I guess this is a long way of saying give yourself some grace. You're not doing it wrong. You're just taking your own path.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think when I think about a book that I've opened up that I've been like, oh, I want to do that, is the I forget, I don't know who publishes them, but the Into the Flood books, and there's a second, maybe that is the second one, I'm not sure. But whoever does the artwork for that, I watched some long video essay about it. Very, very interesting, really evocative work that kind of ties together Stranger Things-esque stuff where it's kind of 80s-y.
You mean Things from the Flood by Simon
Yes,
Stillhog?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think there's a second one that's called something similar.
Well, it's Tales from the Loop is the RPG that uses Simon Stillhog.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No. Yeah. I just happen to be obsessed with this guy's paintings.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Is I saw those, and this is crazy. I want to be able to do stuff like that.
We might have talked about this on the show, Chris, already also. Last week we were talking about art from the various editions of the classic Dragon game, and what art grabbed us at what editions and why. But for me, as a huge retro future, hard sci-fi, what if the Cold War had not ended or ended differently, nerd. Simon Stillhog's work is really amazing, and I was really mad when I found out. I imagine him as an old man in Sweden with one of those brushes that's a single horsehair, but he's not. He's my age, and it annoys me how amazing his art is and how games have picked up on this. But his art are these lush, giant oil paintings of robots, but it's set in an alternate 1980s, 90s where technology advanced very rapidly at the end of the Cold War, and there was basically a mech apocalypse, but also an apocalypse of thought where VR became very advanced, and so people are basically addicted to VR and all live kind of in cyberspace. It's this real dystopian landscape that's extremely painterly, very much in the vibe of Stranger Things, and great for games just even to look at. But yeah, I think that's similar the function of the art in Tales from the Loop. It's you get the whole game from just the cover from that guy's art, even though the game itself is cool and well thought out. It's what gets you to buy a game or what gets you to try it, more to the point, and have fun with it. And sometimes that is, or very often, maybe to Chris, I think what you said, it is one piece of key art that you're just man, I gotta know, who are these people? What is this monster? What is this place?
Yeah, I think that pulls a lot of people into stuff like Morkborg as well, which is very often style first. It's what got me into it. And however you want to go about playing games like Morkborg, where it tends to be very loose and rules light intentionally. You're buying an art book almost first and foremost, and my physical copy is one of my favorite tabletop purchases, just because you can flip through that. It's an example of someone just getting to do what they want. An artist got a hold of a product and was yep, I'm just gonna do whatever I want, and I'm gonna push it as far as I can. And so I enjoy and appreciate when I can see that, not even just in tabletop or in books, like in media as well, like movies and TV shows, where you're like, oh, whoever had the reins on this just got to do the thing they wanted to do, and I think that usually shines through.
Yeah, no.
Totally.
I would be curious to. I mean, we've hopefully we can talk to these folks someday. But like the folks at Stockholm Cartel and Pelle Nielsen, the designer of Morkborg, I would be curious to hear how much the kind of like visual and graphic design that's gone into Morkborg, how much of that inspired the writing, or vice versa. Because I do think that it's an interesting question. It's a pertinent question for designers. And I mean, I think I kind of take a similar approach. Like a lot of the writing that I do is based off of art that I've either seen or produced myself, and then just been like, oh yeah, this is a great idea, should run with it. But yeah, there's different points of entry for that evocation.
Yeah. And we kind of bounce back and forth on Blister Critters as well, leaning into like how cartoony do we want it to be in terms of the writing, and how much do we want it to be like, no, you're like a turtle running around this post-apocalyptic wasteland. It should be dark and dire, and dialing in. So as it relates to the artwork, like dialing in on my front, how cartoony do I make the artwork? My work tends to lean more cartoony, with like lots of stark blacks and like bold colors anyway. So I think it lends itself to being cartoony. But I also really enjoy making work that looks like Morkborg, where there's blood and guts and big black splashes across the page. So in kind of designing some of the initial layout that's going into the quick start, I've been trying to find ways to kind of marry those two loves, to have it be nice and bold, but also get away with it being finding the right mix of like dark and cartoony that I really want people to get out of Blister Critters.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you can see I'm looking at the page for Amu right now, and you can definitely see the kind of Morkborg inspiration, like the bright fuchsias and yellows and stark blacks, and all of that.
Well, so
I mean, yeah.
Before we get in, we should talk more about art for sure. But I just want to introduce the games, because I don't think we've introduced Blister Critters as a game, or Amu.
No, we haven't.
But sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to cut you off in terms of that. Yeah, there is also, Tony. You do this is three things, I guess. There's the games. What is Amu? What is Blister Critters? And also your color palette, right? Because you do have a very distinct color palette and sense of kinetic rhythm. The sort of cartoon look. But I mean that. Often I would mean that maybe a little pejoratively, but here I mean it very positively, where it really reads and has a lot of energy. It is very fun, while still being in many cases, dark and kind of RPG-ish.
Yeah,
that sort of metal inspired.
That's something what I'm aiming for with it. Yeah.
So I don't know. Those are a few different directions, but maybe it would make sense to introduce games so that as we reference them, folks know kind of what we're talking about.
Sure. I'll briefly go back over Amu, but I'd like to focus more on Blister Critters. Amu was a Kickstarter that I did for Zine Quest last year. It's a short kind of corpse dungeon crawl through the dead body of an eldritch god. I intentionally made it pretty system neutral, so you can take any system and smack it on top. That was kind of the first time that I did a project even of that scale. I'd made smaller things and I've homebrewed things, but Amu was the first time that I was like, I'm going to nail down an adventure with writing and semi-put together stats and monsters and all the fixings of a small adventure, and put it into a physical product. And I really nailed down what Wythe was talking about, was a sense of the color palette that I liked working with, and I kind of got the colors into where I wanted them. And then in having that go reasonably well, next step up, and working with Wythe, I was like, I want to make a tabletop game. And like I had said before, I had a couple pieces of artwork that I thought looked cool. And I was actually, before I approached Wythe about, I think, using the grid system specifically, I was already kind of piecing together what I wanted the game to look like. So Blister Critters is a tabletop game using Stillfleet's grid system, where you are a small animal. I think in the rules we're saying it's like no larger than the size of the book. So like 11 inches is kind of the cap for how big of an animal you can be. Running through a post-apocalyptic, post-human world. So in this world, all the humans, poof, are gone. You don't know why, and you're a small animal trying to struggle to be alive, so you don't really care where the humans went. But because you're in this like late 90s, early thousands, humanless suburbia, is where like the core rulebook kind of takes place. But obviously you can be anywhere. All of the humans left their stuff behind. So a core piece of the game is capital S stuff for you to find and use as weapons, and armor to solve problems like building ladders or grappling hooks. So there's like a really, really light crafting mechanic in the game as well. But then on top of that, the blister part of being a critter, the sun as part of like this eco-apocalypse is like supercharged and is quickly mutating all of the life down on Earth. So you being a small turtle running through, your little suburban landscape are quickly picking up these blisters that grant you all kinds of weird, somewhat eldritch, somewhat psychic and weird superpowers that allow you to, depending on what kind of class you end up playing, which blister path you take, let you, be like a silver tongue where you can kind of brainwash people, or you can be kind of like a brute that just builds extra arms and laser eyes and like razor teeth. And the focus of the game is just to be a critter and deal with critter problems. So it's like rival frog gangs in the neighborhood, or there's a two-headed bear that's been screwing up the part of the forest, different stuff like that.
Totally normal RPG stuff, right?
Just a normal RPG.
Chris, what animal would you be if you were playing?
That's a good question. I was looking through the draft of the rules earlier, and I like how you've kind of organized it, where you can be a feathery animal, you can be a furry animal, things like that, and then it kind of gets a little
very
bit more
scientific
granular.
categorizations.
Yeah, deeply scientific topologies there. No, it's great. I think I would be a furry animal. I've often seen myself as I mean, I don't know if you can have an 11-inch dog, but maybe like a Chihuahua, like
like a puppy.
Yeah, very small Chihuahua covered in mutations and blisters.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, I love the way Tony's written it. There's a bit of the MacGuffin of like, because these are all animals who are mutants who are specifically sapient and social, they are not really the original animals from just however many years ago before the eco-apocalypse.
Right.
We don't really know. So it's like, maybe it's just they're sort of branched off, and the feral versions are still basically big wild animals, but you're like the small, cute, smart version that lives in basically human, uses human stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Not really trying to recreate humanity, although I imagine if you played a campaign of this, there'd be like a little bit of an aspect of that. Like, wait, are we becoming the gods who like destroyed themselves? But I think more just, who's interested in like human stuff, who's around humans. So it makes sense that like dogs, cats, you could play as one who's just, kind of cute and small. But then outside there might be like gangs of like big feral, big dogs.
Yeah, I think stuff like that, like really, I'm excited to see what people come up with. I think that because some of the premise is more simple, almost the outside home brewy aspect of it is like, any animal that you want to be big and scary, just make it big and scary, give it laser eyes, give it multiple limbs, or a portion of the game. Sorry. A portion of the game later into even your own advancement as a critter, your own leveling up. You eventually get to take on another animal like talent, another animal power. So you can be like a kitten for like 70% of the game, and then as you like later on, you can take on like an iguana tail. So you're this cat running around with an iguana tail, or you can be a turtle that has like mouse ears. Whatever weird, you can obviously game it to be more fighter centric, or just have it be goofy and take on an extra mutation later on. But that also applies to any of the number of big things running around the world, stalking you and hunting you down. And that's been cool to illustrate, is to try and like piece together like what would be an awful thing to encounter out in the wild.
Yeah.
So like a cat with bat wings would be horrifying. So like that's been cool, just to kind of mash stuff together and have that be part of the game. Is that it's supposed to be kind of silly and absurd, and that's what makes it fun.
Tony, why don't I share some of the art, and we'll have to describe it for the pod, but just so people do watch this on stream later. So here's like, for example, your cat, that guy, cat with laser eyes, basically, a bunch of laser eyes running around, which is a great sketch. And these are all, you're just starting really to illustrate the whole book now that the first draft of the writing is done, and we're kind of editing.
Yeah, I just dived into kind of laying out some of the quick start.
Yeah, but I love, again, you capture the kinetic sort of moment of the cat pivoting. So it's jumping in one direction, but it's turning its body the way cats do, where it's already like going after prey. But in this case, also wherever it's looking, lasers are shooting out of its face, which is just a great
Yeah.
sci-fi like touch.
Does it have a brain
like.
on its tail? Is that what I'm
It's
seeing?
got like a cluster of blisters on it.
Oh, it's a cluster of blisters. Cool. Yeah, I was like, oh man, if it's just an exposed brain on its tail, that would be hilarious. Yeah, that's amazing.
And we can also see the blister tree real fast. So this is, Tony was referencing the idea that instead of classes, you start at the bottom of this sort of, it's more like a fungal mass with fruiting bodies. You know, it's kind of bits connecting. But the powers are all on this one spread. The names of them, and then you can look them up later. But you only really are getting, you're basically getting one a level. You start with one, so it's not like confusing. It's just instead of a traditional class structure, it's a few dozen powers laid out with these branching trees. So you can kind of begin at one end, and you can slowly go in another direction, or you can just go straight up. So Brawler, the sort of I'm just a big bad mutant, you can just keep getting like body related mutations all the way up and up if you survive that long, and then at roughly 10th level or whatever, you are just terrifying little guy.
Yeah.
So there's a little, it's a little class, and that you can also choose, one of these other options that's going to give you slightly different themed powers. But because you can jump around a bit, it's a little more open, and the themes are a lot looser. So it's a lot less because you don't have a job. There's no political economy per se. There is a society, but you're not a person with a job. So it's a different kind of game,
right?
From a game that's reproducing human D&D, but at a small scale. This is leaning more into Tony's instinct of like, yeah, I'm a mutant animal. Like, I don't have a job,
Yeah.
Bigger, or smarter, or whatever, faster. But
no, that's
what's funny is some of the early ideation for like prompting people like what you could do on any given episode, like a session is called an episode in Blister Critters. Was thinking of like what would be like a mundane human thing that would be interesting or much more grand for animals. And one of the smaller things I thought would be funny is like all the humans are gone. Obviously, all their trash and all their litter is still out in the forest. So the critters have kind of banded together, and they've devised their own like garbage teams, and they pay you in like snacks and berries and stuff. But they're like, look, we have to re-inhabit the forest now that the humans are gone. We have to clean them, and so you kind of pay your due. You go in, you grab all the stuff, stuff, capital S stuff, because as you're picking up litter, you can also be like, this would be a cool thing to add to my backpack. This would make a good weapon.
Yeah.
So it's one part like weapon finding, one part recycle and there's a specific word that I'm not coming with, but
the vibe that I'm getting from this is like definitely eco disaster, but it's like Saturday morning cartoons meets eco disaster meets body horror. And I think that all of that's great. Yeah, all of the illustrations that we're looking at really get that across. Like, actually, can we go back to the skill tree or the
blister paths?
The blister paths, yeah.
Blister tree.
Yeah.
I know for the podcast, people aren't going to be able to see this. Maybe we can like link some images in the show notes or something. But I really love the design of this because it feels both mycelial but also kind of cancerous at the same time. So, like, even just looking at the visual design, I'm getting this sense of the world building, even from something that's functionally a mechanical artifact, right?
Right.
Yeah,
and
I really wanted.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tony.
No, I was just going to say that in terms of the way that it's formed and structured, if you were to like set out the way the paths work, it's kind of simple. But I really am trying to like push the form and the shape of it to look more organic. Because again, if you just put them all into similarly sized circles and you just put them straight up, they all merge and they weave and they branch together. But I'm still trying. This is still like a really early draft of it. I'm hoping I can push it even further to really get what you're talking about, to where it does look more organic and much more like plant or lifelike than just goes up Y, up Y, up Y.
When you were designing this, did you start with a more I guess mechanical kind of like draft of it, where it was like, okay, well, I need to plot out everything and then figure out the way it's going to look, or was it just like it just came out this way?
It was a bit of both. Yeah. So the first time that I made it, it was very much what I said earlier. I just made it look cool, and I was like, I'll figure out how it works later. And then I sat down to do a more clean version where the circles were all kind of the same size, and I wanted to figure out how they interacted. And so it's been a bit of back and forth. This one is after I've done a more structured version, and then now I try to map it on to like I started with having them all be dead on, and then just like liquefying them and moving them all over the place to kind of get to where they have to be.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it's been fun working with you, Tony, in terms of design that makes a lot of sense, and there's a core vision behind it that's very clear and doesn't feel random. But the design is being driven a lot by these feelings of like, how can we make this one cool spread, right? Which is a little bit different than how we designed most of Stillfleet, I would say, which was really written, like a lot of it was written on my phone in like the Notes app as like bulleted lists, which became larger, paragraphs. But it wasn't really visualized until later. It was an ex post facto application of graphic design. Whereas here you're kind of starting from illustration design and saying, I know I want sort of types or themes, but I don't want traditional classes, and I want it to sort of fit on a spread and look good and be appealing, but also be really weird and funky and convey the world of the game at a glance. So I like that from the very beginning we're kind of planning the game a little bit differently, without, it's still using the same fundamental scores and whatnot. I'm sure you could eventually imagine, Blister Critters D20 or Blister Critters PBTA or whatever. But I like that it's doing both. It's like checking both boxes in a really fun way that I wouldn't have been able to design this way, right? I think you have to have a certain level of skill with just like rapidly iterating drawings in a way that I feel like I'm comfortable rapidly iterating writing. But it's a different skill to be like, I'll draw and redraw this like complicated tree diagram for funsies. To get it right.
The tree specifically is something that I really want to nail down because I know it's going to be like it's going to be something that people look at a lot. It's like how you literally level up and how you decide where you're going to go. In our call with Leo, I think he had mentioned it'd be cool if we could color on the way up, like color the advancement. So if you're starting at like a brawler and you would follow the arrows as you go, you could like take a crayon or a marker. Because ideally you'd have this printed out somewhere on the table for people to look at. So I like incorporating like something that's like tactile, I think, at the table. If most of the games are going to be played theater of the mind, I like giving people something cool to hold and to look at while they play.
Yeah, and that's something also we can talk about, which is and so this is all, again, just for anyone listening to this in late 2023 or very early 2024, it's all nebulous because we're still writing and playtesting. So, we're thinking of doing a Kickstarter for Zine Quest 2024, which would also still be, time for playtesting and writing. It wouldn't really lock us in until we're producing the final version in the spring of 2024. But, we'd love feedback. But one of the things Tony's brought up also is having lots of little play-aids and thinking through a little bit non-traditional, really fun ways to have sort of optional rules or like world building, collaborative storytelling that isn't just pure theater of the mind, which is more what I tend to do. It's like, okay, you have your character or whatever, now let's imagine we're all in a place, and then all the rules I'm making are for that sort of environment where we're just like looking at each other at a table. But Tony, you've imagined, for example, the idea of doing these like Mad Libs kind of documents there's an optional rule attached to. Imagine the cartography, right? Looking through a house from the scale of, you're a mouse or a bat or whatever, you're this tiny animal, and how would you sort of see that and what would you find? So there's a lot of kind of ways to think through the game and things we want to play around with to like let people do theater of the mind, but then have all these sort of ways that they could enhance it or bring it into the sort of physical world and reinforce some of those themes of like, you're in a cartoon animal universe, you're at a cartoon, you're at an animal scale, etc. So I don't know if you want to launch in any of that, but
So cool, in terms of like bringing people, I really want Blister Critters, because Blister Critters, the world of it is the human world, just without the humans, and after this eco disaster has happened and all the animals are left, I really want to encourage people, and I think I've done so in the writing, to explore the world as a small animal, but like knowing human stuff. To varying degrees. I think it'll be fun for people to re-explore and rediscover the world. But because a large portion of the game is the human stuff that got left behind, your weaponry in the game is whatever you can mangle together. So like for one of the illustrations I'm working on right now, there's a frog that wields, it's like a rubber band ball on top of a pencil that has thumbtacks like sticking out of it. So it's like this big mace. I've had a player use like a not a sewing needle, like a crochet needle as a weapon as well. So encouraging people to think about what would be in a human house, and then that kind of leads into the mapping aspect of it. So in the writing, there's a couple of optional rules for how you would go about like setting a scene, setting up what's in a given room, and then that'll inform the kind of stuff that you can find there. So I usually give the example of like you're entering like what would have been a child's room. What was this kid really into? Was he really into dinosaurs? Oh, there's probably lots of like really cool dinosaur figures around. It'd be really cool if you could like take the Triceratops head and use that as a shield. Are there like mech dinosaurs? Maybe they have little rocket launchers. Rip one of those off and use that as a weapon. Um, and so like when you start thinking about it that way, the options for the things that you can interact with are infinite, and that's like fun because having a really cool dinosaur mech rocket launcher as a weapon, as a tiny frog that also has like rabbit feet would be. It sounds fun to me.
Yeah.
On top of that, something that we actually haven't talked about yet are the glyphs. So stuff that have gained blisters, that have suddenly gained sentience.
Oh wow.
So on screen, for those that are able to see, this is Snippy. He is a pair of scissors that has been cursed with sentience. So glyphs, blistered stuff, in Blister Critters, are inanimate objects that have been suddenly thrust alive. And they aren't incredibly smart. They typically only know the things that they knew how to do when they were inanimate. So Snippy the scissors desperately wants to cut something. So if you were to encounter him as a player, he is probably trying to what it seems like attack you. But if you just offer him like a piece of paper or anything that he could cut, that would probably satisfy him. Um, and so having that option, they would be pretty. They're not like super frequent. They're not just running around, but having those as encounter options as well has been fun to think about. Like, what would a microwave do if a microwave was able to flail about, just smacking its door for locomotion against the ground, or like a gumball machine that is spitting out gumballs like as little projectiles.
Yeah. It's really funny. All of this really strikes me as like the world that you're creating is absent of, but very haunted by humanity and like the Anthropocene.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like this pair of sentient scissors only knows how to do what human beings have designed it to do. So there's still this
there's
like
nothing else.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a darkness to Blister Critters that.
Yeah, it's been something that me and Wythe have kind of bounced back and forth on, and how dark do we want it to be, and then how cartoony, like, because it can go either way, right? It can go really far into it being like super post-apocalypse and dark, or we can go really far into it being a cartoon where everything is zany and fun, which is something that we're writing into the book, where we offer, if you want to play a zany game where everything is kind of fun, go crazy, just swallow a fridge whole as a frog and have that be a thing that you can do. Or if you want to play a more hardcore game where, no, you're a frog and there's a bear hunting you down, that's not nothing. Like, you have to, it's probably like a one swipe from the bear and you're done. So depending on what kind of game you and your table want to play, Blister Critters really offers the whole range, and everything in between. It doesn't have to be one or the other, right? The whole range of playing a Saturday morning cartoon where the stakes are really low but the fun is really high, or the other way around where the stakes are really high but the fun is still pretty high.
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully when this is a podcast, we will hopefully just in a few weeks we'll also be dropping the quick start for Blister Critters. So we would love feedback, but I think one of the ideas we came up with is maybe we'll stream a couple of playtest games, and some will be more in the zany Ren and Stimpy, Looney Tunes, and where it's kind of Cli-Fi, but Ren and Stimpy, so you can your long animal ears can twist and become propeller blades and take you away or whatever.
Yeah.
And there are rules for powers that would let you do some of these things, and I think we're trying to keep it so that the rules are the rules, but there's different interpretations of sort of how to read through, how to interpret this. Because I'd like to try to run one where using the same rules, like what breaks if I'm trying to run it as like like Peter Chung, the guy did Aeon Flux, doing one where it's not as like cartoony in terms of surreal logic, but treating this as like find disruption, all the humans are dead, and so now we're in this kind of red wall watership down scenario with animals, and like what do they do to survive? How do they build like flails out of rubber band balls and thumbtacks? So I think you should be able to ideally use the rules either way, with as long as you're okay with some level of like there's mutants, right? There's like
there's always some amount of like cartooniness. I think it's inherent to Blister Critters.
Yeah. Well, I think that needs to be there. Really, I mean, you can go. There's already so much grimdark content in the world.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think there's something nice about the juxtaposition of the Saturday morning cartoon. I mean, I do get the Ren and Stimpy vibe out of it for sure. But yeah, I like that juxtaposition of like very dark possibility with the game, but then also this kind of like cartoony, fun, bright way of presenting it.
Right, yeah, and there's also already so many animal games. So as you're saying, one of the things I think we both, really liked about Tony's pitch was, I don't see a lot that is, like, I loved Ren and Stimpy as a kid. That was definitely, like, my favorite show growing up, and along with Antics, I guess. And there's something about that style of animal and its relation to actual ecological collapse, for example, and the actual built environment of humanity that I haven't seen other animal games treat. They tend to focus more on this, I don't know, sort of fantastic utopian landscape where there's lots of animals and humans either are not around or they don't really matter. Without, but in a different register here, just as you said, Chris, it's like we want the game to be haunted by humanity, which could take different forms. I mean, it could be in the register of this like grim, dark, like sad, story, or it could just be this kind of zany thing where you're in a very human landscape, which I guess is a little more like, not thinking of like Toy Story, right? But but I think because they're mutant animals, they're drawn in a gross way. It's going to militate against too cute of a reading, even though it's not a game for that's like rated R, right? It's just kind of gross in the cartoon sense.
Yeah, it's the still shots from Ren and Stimpy or from SpongeBob where it's like suddenly it's an oil painting and you can see every pore and every blister, and it's not what you want.
That's literally built into the game. Like one of your powers as a GM, as a producer, as it's called in this game, is to highlight stuff like that. I forget, it's called like a gross out cutscene or something to that effect, where it is like literally a reference to like the SpongeBob kind of thing where they zoom in and it's all crusty and it's been painted. And, so there's also like powers that the GM has, the producer has, to really either lean into it being a cartoon where you have this gag cutaway. Something that I've been doing is like offering like out of context cutaways, like in a show that you would have where your critters wouldn't really know that it's happening, but as a cartoon show you would see this bird, like whatever the predator flapping its wings and on its way, and it'd probably cut back and forth to let viewers know, danger's on the way, it's coming later in the episode. And that's been fun to give players, depending on how well they're able to kind of differentiate like what they know and like player knowledge versus like character knowledge stuff. But there are powers built into the game that let you lean into it being like actually a cartoon, or to what Wythe was saying, where you're just trying to make it, just a hapless mutated little ferret trying to get through the world.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say the other thing that this has reminded me of a lot is Paleomythic. I don't know if you've seen that game, Tony. It's by Graham Rose. It was published by Osprey. I want to say like 3 or 4 years ago now. But it's a stone and sorcery TTRPG. So it's like sword and sorcery stuff, but it's set in like ancient Mu, kind of Pangea setting. But there's similar kind of mechanics around survival and around foraging and creating your own weapons and armor and things like that. But it has a much more, I think self-serious tone to it than Blister Critters obviously does. But yeah, I do. I like. I'm curious to hear more about kind of the crafting mechanic and how you've integrated that into the game.
Yeah, I want the crafting mechanic to be very light, because it should be something that kind of happens like in a cartoon where it's like this blur of lines and little stars popping off. I'm like, oh, there it is, I got the thing. It finishes with like an oven ding. So stuff crafting and basically everything related to stuff utilizes the noggin stat. So if you're playing the game and you want to lean into being like a tinkerer or the person that people go to craft stuff together, you're going to want to throw your better dice into the noggin stat. And it's really, you grab all stuff in the game, takes up your inventory space, your stuff points. So every critter has a set amount of stuff points that they can keep on their person, either in their hands or on their backs. That's not really, like, we're not that crunchy about it, but let's say you have 5 stuff points. And as you grab stuff, smaller stuff is 1 stuff point, a little bit larger, 2. So at the point where you're grabbing something that's like 4 stuff points, which would be like probably like a hammer, like a human hammer, you're probably only to carry that and one other thing if you're a turtle. So as it relates to crafting, you would add the stuff points together of however many components you have. So if you're putting a bunch of like smaller stuff together, it might still add up to 5 stuff points as like the difficulty for the crafting check. And then you just try and beat or exceed a 5, or hit or exceed a 5, in terms of being able to successfully craft that thing. It's not something I want to be terribly difficult, as I want to encourage people to lean into finding cool stuff and then crafting it together. Obviously, if you're trying to put like 2 hammers together, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but I still want you to be able to try.
Yeah.
And then because of the blister tree, and because you're able to lean into different kinds of play, if you're playing the thinker, which is like the opposite end of the brawler, they actually get like bonuses and are granted advantage on crafting checks, on stuff finding. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you've done well throughout the book is just state over and over again that like there's stuff everywhere. So it's really somewhat a question of imagination, carrying capacity, and like people's interest. So and also people's interest and character interest, because the person can be like, I want to do the scene in the bathroom because I want to make a shiv, like a lance, like a halberd out of a
toothbrush.
A kid's toothbrush.
Yeah.
But like the character might be like, I am a rat. I don't like that is a weird stick. I'm gonna go over here and like eat this expired cereal, and like so there's interesting tensions that, again, because it's only very lightly been play tested yet. I think that's something we're looking for feedback on as we develop it. But I think it's already in there in a really great way, which is like there is an infinitude of interesting material around you that you as a human at a certain scale take for granted and only use a certain way. That
Absolutely.
If you were a mutant rat, you would have instantly like a different relationship to, and it's lightly mechanicalized, but there are different attributes that make it interesting enough where certain animals are just bigger, stronger, that they're able to carry more. Certain animals are a little smarter. Certainly a baby monkey is going to be smarter than a bat. And so
whoa, let's not hate on bats.
I'm not hating on bats. We're just pointing out like
no, I'm kidding.
Manual dexterity. I don't know. I'm not worried about a bat stabbing me with anything, but I should be. I guess I should be.
Stab you with rabies.
No, that's definitely
true.
something that I wanted to lean into. Is giving, is letting that like imagination. It really lets each player dive into however imaginative or explorative they want to be with the world. So in some of the few playtests that we've done, I've just like. Most of the time, as a critter, you're starting out your life in a burrow, so underground. You don't have a lot of exposure to the human world. So as part of your first kind of adventures above ground, you're seeing a lot of things for the very first time. So in one of the first playtests that we did, I described like the door to the bathroom, which is where their burrow exited out into, as like the largest thing that they've ever seen. Like they've spent however many months or even a year or so underground, but the big white like plywood door to this person's home is the largest object they've ever interacted with. And my players ran with that and were like, oh, that must be the moon, because I've heard the moon is really big and white. That has to be the moon. So for the rest of the game, there were multiple moons that they had to go through. So stuff like that, I think, is a reliant upon, the producer, the GM, but also how invested the player is. Because there's any number of players that they just want to run around and like beat up the weird mutant beasts, and this game does that. But if you want to be like a little mouse running around a house for the first time, just like take a look at the desk in front of you or wherever you are, and all of the stuff on that desk that mouse could interact with and like chew into a weapon or mash together into like a ladder or a bridge or whatever you would need. It really is a matter of imagination, which I think is fun. I think giving people a sandbox world that has just enough of like a railroad or just enough guidelines, I think is probably a better word, to kind of channel that imagination. It has been fun.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I like just the idea in general of reframing human spaces through a non-anthropomorphized kind of lens. I mean, I think that's a big appeal with this game for me. And I guess like Mouse Ritter, Mouse Guard, there's a few other games that have kind of explored this, but I think to White's point earlier, those tend to stay in kind of more of a like fantasy. You're not really thinking about humans as much. So yeah, there's different connotations. But yeah, it's funny to think about like this tiny apartment in Brooklyn that I'm in right now would feel like a cathedral built by gods
Yeah.
to a mouse, which makes me feel bad for trapping a mouse recently. But
Yeah, well, that's been fun. That's been fun to work on in terms of like the scale of stuff, which is why there there are a couple of different like mapping mechanics because the spaces are so different and they're so much vaster and larger um, that your apartment is like a mini dungeon for a pack, a group of critters to run around in.
yeah,
Similarly, like I always bring it up whenever I talk to Wyeth about it, but I really want to do like a mini supplement where the location is an arcade because I just think like a 90s arcade would be crazy for just a bunch of little critters to run around in, and maybe there's like organized crime coming out of the
ooh,
arcade or whatever the case is. But what a cool place to explore, being like 7 inches tall,
yeah.
um, and having that be its own like mini or maybe major dungeon. That's just on one part of the strip. So if you set your Blister Critters world up as even your hometown, which I think people can and would probably like to do, you can visit your arcade
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
can run around your hometown arcade as this little critter and wreak havoc and have your own little in jokes and know where stuff is and uh, yeah,
I think
Well, not just the arcade, but anywhere. And I think that's
anywhere,
something
yeah.
that I like about the game is it's very much it's a game with a narrative structure that's very different from Stillfleet or Danse Macabre or Blades in the Dark, a Cartel or something. Other games I like, Eat the Reich or something. But it's a game with a narrative structure, which is in a way GM and players like where did you grow up and what was that experience like and what if you were an animal in your old home. And I think that's something Tony, you and I have talked about growing up in the suburban South at different points in time, and how there's specific attributes of that world. And if you I mean, it's kind of like I just read this amazing short manual tabletop wargaming that Chris gave me. So I'm thinking about this, but they talk about that, how you have to miniaturize. Like, you can't do the Battle of Waterloo because you don't have 300,000 miniatures. So, like, you have to think logically, a designer, well, how do you kind of represent multitudes or, like, represent the chaos or a city being invaded or whatever? So a city becomes 3 houses. And I think similarly, you can't represent all of Atlanta in the 90s, but you could pick like your street you grew up on or like a fantastic idealized version. And since we've been talking, it's something I've talked about with Ethan, who loves your work and we work together. And I mean, Ethan wants to do one set in Rochester. I want to do one set in my uncle's house in Baton Rouge. I want to see these supplements that are like short, kind of like very specific dungeons. They're dungeon crawls that are limitless, and it's the classic narrative structure: explore a space, find loot. But in this version, you're mutant Ren and Stimpy, and there's no humans, and so there's, I think there's enough novelty, but there's also a very classic way to get players and GMs kind of instantly engaged. And you've come up with all these fun little mechanics, which I guess are all optional in a way, but I think, the idea of collectively mapping or doing these kind of ad-libs about the fake products that are in the house, right, to explore, like, the cultural world that, the rat may not know, but the player is going to get a laugh of the made-up product.
Yeah.
So I think those are all ways in that, like, most people playing games today in the English language world, they don't have to have grown up in the suburban U.S. per se, but like there must be some link where they're like, okay, I'm going to use sort of something from my childhood in that scale when I was a little smaller and things were a little newer, and kind of mess with it and make fun of it. And I think that's just such an inviting world that's a little bit fresh, compared to, not to knock the ye old fantasy animal games, but it's a little different than, I'm in D&D, but I happen to be tiny. Yeah.
I also think that that infusing the whole thing with the vernacular of Saturday morning cartoons is really smart in that way as well. Because I mean, immediately, we've talked about Ren and Stimpy, we've talked about SpongeBob, but I'm also thinking about like other shows that maybe no one else watched, but like Two Angry Beavers, or even like Ed, Edd and Eddy, right? Like Ed, Edd and Eddy, it's about suburbia. Dexter's Lab is kind of about suburbia. So there's these like cultural cues that is, I think, especially if you grew up in the late 80s, in 90s, like Wyeth and I did, or if you grew up in the 90s, like you have these kind of really easy points of entry into the world just because you've grown up with that media already, but then you're giving it that extra twist.
Yeah, like Ed, Edd and Eddy is a huge touchstone for when I'm trying to think of like what would be like. I get to do research and then I'm watching Ed, Edd and Eddy or like Ren and Stimpy. I'm like, yeah, I'm working right now. But in watching stuff like that and being like, oh, I can write something, I can include that and just have that be something that people can do in the game. Like swallowing a fridge whole is something that like Ed does in one of the episodes or something. But like that's a nonsense power. That's a power that someone, if they really wanted to, maybe not a fridge, but you know, if you wanted to do something wild and absurd, you should be able to exercise that. And you know, cartoons that really lean into having a world of absurdity that is in some ways tied to like the mundane are like big inspirations for the way that I'm trying to approach Blister Critters, and in couching it, and it's something that like in couching it in um, like a modern-ish setting. It's like 20 years dated, so it's like the late 90s, early thousands that I'm trying to like set it. You could play it whenever, but that's kind of where I'm trying to set the art and a lot of the writing. Um, I don't I don't know of many. I'm sure there are. I'm sure they exist, but a lot of like modern stuff is like post-apocalypse that will really lean into like maybe there's a better touchstone for it, but like Walking Dead-esque post-apocalypse
Sure.
where everything is like gritty and sweaty and dirty, and you're usually a human, and if you're not, you're still gritty and sweaty and dirty. Um, and so I I'd like to see more. If I'm not aware of them, there's an infinite world of tabletop games that I don't know about. Um, but I'm enjoying creating not something that's clean because it's still kind of gross and it's still
Definitely.
you know kind of dirty or dark or whatever. But I'm enjoying having a post-apocalypse modern setting that is intentionally and specifically fun and like cartoony that isn't you know everything sucks all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
There's
can be fun. I play those games, but if I have a hand in it, I'd like for it to be like, no, we're gonna play in this almost like a liminal world where all the humans are suddenly just gone,
yeah.
which is something that someone brought up during a really early playtest that I've tweaked since. That was like, man, there's like nobody here, and I'm like, yeah, that's the point. Everyone's gone.
Yeah.
And I've had to like write and make it feel like the world isn't some like liminal horror, you know, everything the world is empty and it's that's what's scary about it. It should be still full of stuff to do.
Yeah.
Um, but it is kind of spooky that all the humans are
But
just
yeah, you could play it either way. I mean,
could.
that goes back to the idea of zany
Yeah.
versus grimy, and I think that's the strength of the game. You know, feature not a flaws. You could play it as haunted by humanity, or
Mhm.
you kind of lean into almost like a it's a sort of misanthropic version of this, but like there's a hopefulness that life will go on, some form of life. It may be mutant or different or new, you know, strange. And I think a lot about just because it's probably my favorite movie of all time, but like Stalker by Tarkovsky in the ending, spoiler, you know, where like his daughter has like telepathic abilities or whatever, and you're just like telekinetic abilities, and I think some of that is the idea that like yes, you know, people, you know, capitalism has destroyed the world and ground us humans to dust as we define humanity. But this comes up a lot in post-humanity studies, as well as especially now like critical theory of all kinds, around the value of the category of the human, and like maybe we need to move beyond the human or kind of reject certain enlightenment notions of the human, because those guys, for one, they fucking owned slaves, and they thought animals didn't have souls and you could do whatever you want to them, and you know, there were some real problems with their conception of like what a human is. So I think I know that, Tony, that's not necessarily the thing animating you as a creator, but when I read your pitch, you know, when I was thinking about this, it's like, oh, this is very much in line with our ethos and like things we want to do at Stillfleet Studio, and just things I think about a lot in terms of, yeah, is it hopeful or really kind of sad and monstrous that all the humans are just vanished? And you know, how do you want to play that as a GM? But I do think they reinforce each other, right? So there's a yin yang or like sweet sour thing where I think if it was just hopeful, to me that would feel a little silly and almost like, I don't know, not disrespectful, but it would be missing something. And yeah, to your point, if it was really dark and, you know, every game, like to Chris's point, there's a lot of grim, dark games. So I think having a sweet and sour version is good. And it reminded me of a game that I like. I've only read, but I met the creator. It was a fun read. It's very short. Also, as you know, tomes go, nice hardback books. It was a very short one called Rotted Capes. And Tony, I know you and I spoke about it a lot because it is this weird hybrid where it's about a classic, you know, superhero universe where Z-Day happens, and it also affects soups. So there's basically now different kinds of people. There's normal people, and then there's normal superheroes and zombie superheroes. And each of them are divided into basically A-listers and B-listers. You play as a B-lister who has not become Z.
Nice.
And so in a way, like, you have a job, save people, be a hero. It's a cartoon, two-fisted, you know, beat up the bad guys universe. But, like, when you're fighting bad guys, sometimes they are zombies who are A-listers. And it is terrifying. So though it really does both at once and walks this line of like very, very dark and also very fun. and just making fun of, in the style of The Boys, right? It's like making fun of
Yeah.
superheroes. And so it mechanicalizes all this. It's a very crunchy, it's a very much a combat crunchy system, but it made me, which is your game is not at all, but it brought to mind that same thing of having your cake and eat it, where like it's a little bit funny, but it has the potential for this dark kind of commentary and really kind of gritty, like, oh man, what would I do? Do I save this person or am I a solo asshole? The zombie apocalypse stuff.
I mean, I would describe this and Rotted Capes as kind of like post-apocalyptic gallows humor, right? It's like there has to be something funny, there has to be some kind of like joy that we can get out of this, but also maintaining the acknowledgement that the Anthropocene's pretty fucked up. It's not great. We're probably going to do ourselves in, and then the world will probably go on afterwards, and we'll have to see what that looks like. But yeah, I like having to imagine that world where we're no longer around, but our archaeology still is.
Yeah, and that's something dealing with like what does civilization look like? What does it even mean if like the humans aren't here? And meanwhile, I've talked a little bit about it, but like all the critters come from burrows, so like small collections of critters that like band together either underground or in some enclosed space to like protect them from the sun. And how do they interact? Because I've had fun in my in some of my smaller like playtests of having the burrow that you come from being like not welcoming to strangers, doesn't really want you to talk to critters from other burrows, doesn't encourage trade. And so when you run into a critter from a different burrow, that's like, wait, you guys don't trade like food, you guys don't trade resources, you guys don't take care of each other. We're living great. We're doing awesome. We're not short on food, and you guys clearly are, but you don't want to trade with us. That's obviously a really simplified way to kind of put that kind of conflict. But introducing and having that be a small part of like a story, or it can be like the entire season, the entire campaign of trying to convince your burrow leader, like it probably would be better if we welcomed people from other burrows into ours, and what we could learn, the critter's ability to read human language is like fuzzy, and critters aren't really sure if they can or not. So like the knowledge that can be gained from human text, like wouldn't that be shared? Why would that be something that you would hold on to? Or like libraries of critter burrows that maybe have cracked the code on the ability to read, and they have all these really valuable books for crafting smaller tools, or how to fix tools, or how to turn the lights on. Because the electricity's all out because there's no human around to run it. So incorporating small bits of that kind of like really simplified like civilizational like conflict of like, why don't we just show each other how to turn the lights on? It would benefit everybody. And it's like, well, I don't want to. I'm like, okay. So that's been fun in the minor amount of playtesting and the minor amount of exposure that I've had to it. I think is going to be like another lever that people can pull if that's a direction they want to take Blister Critters in, is the kind of community rebuilding and civilization restarting aspect of it. Like, your town is absent all the humans and everything's kind of in disarray. How is your burrow and how are you guys going to band together to kind of get, whatever your address, whatever your zip code is, kind of back under order, or at least functioning better than it currently does.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it provides players with a little bit of a tabula rasa, right? Where it's like, okay, well, what do we do with this weird world that's both alien and familiar at the same time?
Yeah. I think that's I think the idea of something being alien and familiar is really at the heart of the game, and I think I mean, again, I hope players come up with a lot of fun options drawing on their own lived experience, whether it's childhood or like their pets, frankly, or just stuff like one of the things Tony said that I thought was really striking is like, I want to GM stuff where I'm looking at my own desk, or any GM is looking at their desk and like picking up objects and like presenting it in sort of the tradition of, in literature, it's called Martian poetry, so strong denaturalization or defamiliarization. So you're describing kind of everyday things, but in this very almost like overly scientific way where it's kind of jokey, but it causes that dissonance where like the thing that they're talking about, but it really forces you to see it from a new perspective. So in the famous original, I think, Martian poem, I forget that it has some beautiful line about like, the Martians are basically coming to London and they're like watching people, and they say, every night they watch movies alone by themselves in their heads. And it's that idea of a dream being a movie that you're watching yourself and you're enjoying and eating popcorn. And it's like, it's just really kind of a profound way that, like, yeah, how would someone who is not human understand, like, everything, you know, the choices made to build McMansions in the suburbs of the Sunbelt cities, or insert whatever the thing you're interested in, right? So I thought that was like a fun spark that I instantly had ideas for games and stories. So, you know, again, we hope people check it out, and maybe we'll do another episode later on when the product sort of exists and we've seen where Tony's taken in terms of
I think that would be
what's official.
I think that would be great. I mean, we should also do a playtest episode. If Tony, if you're amenable to that,
absolutely,
that would be super fun.
Yeah, I'm super down.
I thought about it. The critter that I would want to be would be a like a 6 to 8 legged wiener dog. That's my final answer.
Sweet. We can make that happen.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
We can deal with that. Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, Tony, you know, I don't know. I mean, so it's about an hour. I don't know if you want to keep chatting. Maybe we can talk about.
Yeah.
We can talk a little about like your art praxis. I mean, I'm kind of curious.
Sure.
You know, honestly, I don't know how much different people will want out of this podcast. It's kind of a new project for Chris and myself, but any practical tips is something that sometimes does come up. You know, whether it's on subreddit for TTRPG design or in Discord servers or just in conversations. So since you are really a professional artist who's mostly, as I understand it, illustrating RPGs, that's how I've mostly interacted with you.
Professional with a lowercase p.
Well, I mean, you know, you're doing a lot of it.
As all the best professionals should be.
Yeah.
Right. But maybe you have some thoughts on that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you. Maybe Chris, you have more articulate ones. The question that jumps to mind is like, how did you get started with drawing in such a way where you could very quickly kind of take these fantastic science fictional or just wild ideas, surreal ideas, and render them, you know, faithfully, quickly. You know, any advice kind of there, or, you know, again, I don't know, Chris, if you want to jump in, is another professional drawer?
No, that's a good question.
But I love this stuff. I'm very jealous. I love both of y'all's styles. Very different. You know.
Yeah, I think on my part, it's something that I get told frequently that I am like quick, or that I am able to like materialize like at least sketches relatively fast. I think it's largely down to my style. I probably draw kind of quick, but I do think that it's a nature of the style that I've really honed in on over the past couple of years that like allows me to, in a sense, get away with it looking more finished, because my work is so line art heavy. Like with the image that's on screen, like if we took away the color, it'd probably still look good. And that's largely because I focus on doing the line work first and making sure that it would stand on its own, which I think most people probably should. I think that if the line work looks good without color added to it, you're on a good track for the color to look even better. But I guess like a short answer before I ramble too much is that I think it's largely just down to my style. I think that because I work kind of Mignola-y, where I like having the really stark black shapes, that's kind of where I've been starting as of late, where I've been trying to figure out more of the like the dynamic poses and shaping, especially for Blister Critters, because it's so cartoony, and I want to lean into the zany action of it, especially for the combat image that we're looking at, where I really wanted to push some of the shapes and the forms and lean into the motion of it. Some of that stuff I think benefits a quicker hand. So I think that if you're trying to really meticulously like measure the angle that the neck should be like breaking at, I think you're going to have a hard time pulling off something that feels like natural and dynamic. But because I do just kind of throw it on there, and I'll go back and forth at it. It's not like it's just the one line that's done. But I do think a quicker, more irreverent hand can lend itself to more dynamic posing.
Yeah. Something I find often is that the more naturalistic you try to draw something, that you try to render something, the less dynamic it feels. Like I run into that all the time, especially with animal shapes. Like I have this tendency to go really naturalistic with animals or with plants for tattooing in particular, and it always feels a little bit more stiff. But yeah, I think to your point, when you loosen up a bit and you're kind of just like going like, okay, I'm going to block out these shapes, I'm going to block out these like large black shading areas, things like that, it does allow you to have a little bit more of that movement, which lends a lot to the design of this book.
Yeah, especially with the big black sections in the illustrations is something that I think might be a mistake of people trying to do a style similar to this, where they're like, I'll just do this part black. and I'll get away with it. Where it is intentional, it is like, oh, this is a part that is in shadow, or this is a part where I don't really want people to focus on. Not because it's not done well or because the shape is wrong, but the focus of an image should be where should, I put the black parts not where I want the focus to be, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes I do put a ton of black in an area where I want there to be a ton of contrast, where I want there to be for it to really pop. So like even on the one that like Wyatt just pulled up, like having the black kind of raccoon mask at the top, like is a lot more contrast than the rest of his body, which is mostly black, covered in shadow. And he's mostly in black because you're really supposed to be looking at the turtle.
Yeah, the mirror and the turtle. Yeah.
In the mirror and the turtle.
Yeah, so that's so. I mean, and for podcast viewers, I mean, but basically, it's sort of chiaroscuro, right? It's like a raccoon where because the raccoon's tilted, half of the raccoon's body is kind of shadowed black by a sort of self-shading, and also holding up looks like a big button or something at a little turtle. The turtle's in the foreground, and the shield, the button is closer to us, and in the background, is this raccoon who's larger but is half in shadow, plus the mask, right, is black. So it's a black and white image. It's a sketch, but just. It seems like, Tony, one of the things you're saying, if I'm hearing you right, to paraphrase, is you're sometimes starting with a sense of like where you want the focus to be, where you want those really vivid, warm colors that you're known for, are gonna pop to be, and then what is going to be sort of shadowed or using chiaroscuro to recede things into the background. And that's like one way to kind of get started with like taking your vision in your head to pick it.
Yeah, it's definitely like yes, all of those things paraphrased better than I was able to. Yes, that. Some of it too is, especially when you're trying to like fill out, I guess like depending on like the brief or the project, but because I'm putting together the quick start very design and layout focus, it's not like I'm just trying to fill in squares where like a 2-column page and there's like a 3-inch square at the bottom that I need to fill in. I'm almost approaching them art first, and then I'm going to figure out where I'm going to fill the text in afterwards. I have much more freedom to have the shapes of the image and then the motion that they convey. Because if you're reading a page left to right and kind of going down, depending on where you have that image, it might entirely screw up somebody's like line of vision, intentionally or unintentionally. So if you do want it to be something that kind of stops them and has them like really focus on it, then you do kind of want to break that that like line of sight, I guess, or the motion of the reading. But like for the cat image, for those that can't see, it's very angular. It's kind of almost like it's one big black paw, it's like a triangle that's pointing down, and the laser eyes point in the opposite direction. And in the layout, it points directly to where you kind of need to be looking to read. So I think that I definitely try to make a very dynamic pose for the cat to create a lot of motion at the top of the page. But I am also considering what's like the reading experience going to be like, because I just have this big spaghetti monster on the page, but the text is kind of flat. It's going to look weird. So I'm definitely focused on marrying the two to varying success. Like I haven't done a million books, so I'm sure that I'll get better and better over time. But it is something that I'm trying to keep in mind.
Yeah, Chris, I have a question about that for you. I mean, as someone else who writes and illustrates and does layout. So we all do layout at various, interest in that. But I primarily am just a writer, and I'm hiring, y'all, someone, Ethan, to draw things. So, but as someone who's writing and illustrating and laying out, does this, do you let the writing lead? Are you letting the art lead? Do you start with layout and blocking, which is kind of how I think of it, as like what's going to look balanced with what, or when you have empty spreads that are just too much text and you want to liven them up? Is that a process that you similarly like consider, or?
Yeah, it's something that I definitely consider. I think I take a bit of a different approach where I'm definitely letting the writing lead first for the text, and then kind of figuring out art and layout after the fact there. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just keep on thinking, Tony, you started off saying that you might do this the wrong way, but I just keep thinking there's not a wrong way as long as it gets done.
Sure.
As long as it's on the page.
Yeah, it just feels like whenever I talk about it, it's like, no, I want to make sure that like the text is 100%, and then I'll figure out where I can squeeze in the art. And then in my mind, whenever I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, I know on this page I'm going to want this big image of a cat with laser eyes. So how much text do I really need to have on this page? how succinctly can we put this really core mechanic on the page? Because I desperately want a half-page image of a cat.
Yeah.
And I think it has its pros and cons. Like I think it lends itself to being like a really visually striking book, which is what I enjoy. But there are times where I think that going art first can be like, okay, well, you have this plan for a half-page image of a cat, but the rules are going to take up like 2 pages now. And I was like, that's probably not necessary to do it that way. So it is a balancing act, but I do think that I skew like, what's my idea for this page? How can I make it happen visually? And if I can cut a sentence off the rules to make it happen, then I'll just do that.
Sure.
You know,
I mean, brevity is the soul of wit, right? Like, if you can communicate your rule set in a way that makes sense and is, as long as it's legible and it's there, that's great.
Yeah, I found with Stillfleet, Eric Lazar, my friend, one of my brother's best friends, who laid out the core rulebook, would be sending me these comments because we work in Google Docs, and he's laying that in InDesign before my wife and I took over all the layout, and he would be like, hey, this would look a lot better if I can cut one line. Like, there's a lot of text across this spread. Can you just get rid of like a couple words, like literally? And I'd be like, why are you asking me? I've worked on this script for like 10 years to like cut some words.
It's impeccable.
No, but then now that I'm laying out my own stuff and other people's stuff for Stillfleet, I'm like, I'm cutting, right? I'm cutting my own stuff. I'm like, Ian, I'm cutting the word thoroughly here. You don't need it. You've made this clear in this paragraph. It'll make everything tighten up like instantly. You get rid of that one long word, and suddenly there's no hanging, weird stuff. The paragraphs all look great. You're not breaking your own little internal design rules. So it's like I just got it by doing it for dozens of hours in a way that when I had barely done it and someone else was doing it, I was like, I don't want to cut 2 words off. This entire spread.
How dare you tell me to cut any word?
So no, but I get it. So it is an interesting recursion that the more that I've done it, and again, without directly being as involved in the art, I have done background, like basically drawings of plants, but there's a recursion between like there's an idea for a section conceptually from the game level, but when you're making it, you have to have words and you have to have to some degree visuals of some kind, and a lot of that in our in the current indie RPG world is like quarter-page illustrations of various kinds or tables, and so you end up sort of having to marry these things. And it really does. There's a feedback where you realize like there just needs to be art. I've done 3 spreads in a row with no art, and it looks weird. Or there's a ton of art and it's great, but like we can't fit it all in the spread, so you gotta sort of make choices. So anyway, that is a very much to me a learn by doing thing. I'm wondering how you would even like explain principles. I'm sure there are best principles about balance, right?
There definitely are. I've not read them, but I'm sure they're out there.
Well, we need to bring on someone who's really into that.
We do.
Because y'all have illustration covered, but I'm curious about
layout.
That's a different.
Yeah, layout design is that's a whole world unto itself.
Yeah.
I believe James from Burrowbound might be a person.
Oh, yeah, true.
Maybe get Eric on too.
Like if you scroll up to the gravestone image, that's where like I'm gonna be. I have like the death text, like what happens when you die, and so now I'm like, all right, how much do I love this image to where I'm gonna squash down the death text? It all fits currently, but as we start to add more to it, if we add more to it, am I abandoning this image that I think is gonna be cool? It sits in the bottom corner of the page. It doesn't take up that much more than everything else. So this was an instance where I had the text first, then I had the idea, and then it's a matter of, which I think any creative kind of deals with, is like how tied to this iteration or how tied to this expression of this idea am I, and would there be a better way to go about it?
Yeah.
Because it works so fast, I'm able to iterate on it quickly. So it wasn't like there was a ton of time lost. It took me maybe 10 or 15 minutes to put this together. And so in that case, I can iterate on layout over and over and over again. For better or for worse, I can spend a long time putting together different layout spreads for what looks like the same thing to anybody else.
Yeah.
Well, one of the good things, so speed is definitely of the essence, but also maybe collaboration, because I think that's where you do just get regardless, not regardless of who it is, but it's not so much like, I'm so great at all this stuff, but just being able to talk to someone else who has, let's say, laid out specifically RPG books, right? And you can get people's feedback, and that's where a lot of indie creators, I think, are coming from a place of working solo and trying to learn all the skills. But especially in this post OSR moment, I feel like you are seeing a lot of people work together and collaborate, and it's a really nice, vibrant community where you learn sort of who's interested in what projects, and if you can, I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to financials, I think, and a lot of like what can actually pay for our time versus what's sort of just, okay, this is a friendly hobby thing, which is totally cool, probably the majority, right, of the work being done, but yeah, I love this, and I love the idea here, especially of leaning into some of the cartooniness at the level of graphic interpretation. So the section on character death starts with some text in a big ass gravestone with a raven with a skull face. Why? Because we can, right? Because it's a cartoon.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't do that, right, in the fantasy grid system game, just because it's a little, you know what I mean? It's like on the nose, but here it's like no, everything. It's Ren and Stimpy, right? If
it's supposed to be gross, on the nose. Yeah.
It's literally like we need to see an interior shot of Stimpy's like nostril as he's picking his finger, right? That's the kind of level of like. So it's a different graphic design universe than like realistic-ish sci-fi or typical high fantasy, et cetera, et cetera.
You know what I think spoiled me on having artwork all over the place? I think it was either the last Zine Quest or the Zine Quest prior, but Slow Quest, Bodhi is a creator, and his work is very much like art and layout and writing in this one big married fusion in his Zine Quest Kickstarter for Goblins. It's fantastic. It's a really, really fun little adventure to play through. But it came with a ton of artwork, and every page is its own beautifully illustrated spread. And it's just front to back, 30-something pages of just straight artwork. And I think that really spoiled me in that, like, I want to do that. Like, I can do the 2 columns, but like Bodhi did it, where he had every page be this crazy illustrated spread that probably took way too long. That's what I want. And so I do think to a certain extent I've been skewed away. I think because I brought Hag Mag, was a Zine Quest from last year. It's like a 5e setting guide. It's beautifully illustrated, really, really well laid out, and most of it is just 2-column block text on a white background, and it looks great. So I think both have their place, and I think that where I lie is, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go crazy with it, and I want each page to feel like you're opening a new piece of artwork, because I do think as thoroughly as I enjoy like games creation and sharing it with people, I think I'm an illustrator first and foremost. And I get to express that through the game's creation.
Right. Yeah, right. And back to the beginning of the conversation, that's a little bit like the Merkborg aesthetic, which is, was their interpretation of OSR rules that different? I would say no, but mechanically, right? But visually, it was very different. It organized differently. It looked different. It had different energy. To some degree, different wording, different kind of tone. But if you strip down the rules, it wasn't really a reinvention at the level of rules. It was like a representation. So I think that makes sense that Blister Critters, if you had to put things on the spectrum from sort of Merkborg to like, I guess like GURPS or Riffs, or, just like
white box.
Lots of text, then, it's not good or bad necessarily. It's different audiences. And also I think some of it, like we're talking about is are you coming from like, I'm drawing art, I want to make this art into a game, or in my head, I'm writing kind of bulleted lists, that then I need an artist to illustrate each of these bullets. So there's sort of, you can meet in the middle, but I'm very excited for Blister Critters to look also just very different than Stillfleet. It's the first non-Stillfleet product we've put out, right? So it'll be the first time as a company or whatever we're trying to really do justice to someone else's vision. It's not all about me at all. So I think it's an awesome game. I'm gonna play it a lot, and I've been editing it, but yeah, it's very much Tony, your vision. So super excited to do that. I guess, is there maybe you want to do a couple like last thoughts or plugs or anything? Or Chris, do you have more questions you want to?
No, I am tapped. But yeah, Tony, if you have anything that you want to plug or put out there, I know you have other projects other than Blister Critters that already exist in the world and look beautiful.
Yeah. So if you want, Amu is up digital for the time being. On my itch page, I have a couple of smaller games, including Frogs with Shotguns is up for print and play, along with some other smaller supplements. I made like a coding, like a cipher font if you want to create like puzzles and stuff for your world. Those are all on oddgobgames.itch.io. I'm working on a Morkborg modern apocalypse hack with like zombies and robots. That'll be coming out probably before the end of the year, if not sometime start of 2024.
Nice.
Depending on when this gets released, maybe it's already a thing, and you can go look for that. It'll be called Madborg, M-A-D Borg. And the biggest thing I want to plug, which we've been talking about the whole time, is Blister Critters, which will be going live for Zine Quest in 2024. I appreciate your guys' time and talking to me and letting me ramble a little bit about what I've been working on. So I've had a ton of fun sitting here with you guys.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah, no, it's always fun.
I'm very excited for Blister Critters. I cannot wait to be a mutated wiener dog in the future.
I'm excited to illustrate that now, and I'm going to set aside some time.
Yeah.
Make sure that exists somewhere.
Yeah, wait till you have to hang out with my mutated, I don't know, like, maybe I'm like a butterfly who thinks that I'm venomous, but I'm just a butterfly. So I'm like, I talk a lot of shit. I'm like a butterfly hair metal guy, you know, like bandana. Yeah, bro, that's you don't want to mess with me, bro. But I'm actually just a very
fragile
pretty boy. So, all right, we got to play this game now. We're gonna get this quick start done, Tony. We got to get this out to the world to play this game. Thanks so much for coming on Why We Roll. You know, again, we're sort of experimenting with format, but I thought it'd be awesome to have you on early in the process. So again, we can maybe have you on in a few months, and the book is out or in process, and we can sort of, you know, if you've played it, we can look at more. Chris, thanks for again, you know, letting us jump in and do some, you know, light marketing. Get Tony's book. I guess for now, this is Why We Roll, and you can find us at Why We Roll or at Why We Roll Pod, depending on the thing. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Tony. Thanks everybody for watching and for listening.
Awesome. Bye.
Later.
Thanks for listening to Why We Roll. Our theme music is by the brilliant Sam Tyndall and Arpline. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You can find us on Twitch and what used to be Twitter at Why We Roll, and on Instagram at whyweroll.pod.
You can find out more about Dance Macabre at timespaceplace.itch.io/dance-macabre.
You can find out more about Stillfleet at stillfleet.com. Thanks for listening.
Hey there, I'm Hugh from Moderation. If you like today's episode, why not check out The Next Session, your D&D agony aunts there to answer all of your questions. Join Adam and Alyssa as they answer questions sent in by listeners like you about how to solve the problems that come with running and playing in all sorts of different tabletop scenarios. Available wherever you get your podcasts.